we're going to do something kind of fun here. I really am interested in the curation space. I feel like data has been a hot topic, and there's so much to do with it, and there's so many new inferences that can come from all of this data that's out there that's now being collected, and I still think it's early innings, and I'm sure our distinguished panelists will weigh in on that. But the kind of thinking is, where is curation coming from with that, and how is data influencing curation, and does it belong in the curation process? So we've got this interesting, hand-selected, distinguished group of panelists, and I'm going to hopefully have them each introduce themselves, and then we can kind of dive into that topic and explore it, and then we'll leave some room for questions from all of you as well. So, without further ado,
I guess I'll start. Sadie, let's start here. All right, well, anyway, I'm Syd Cohen. I'm Director of Client Services at Next Big Sound, and how many people know what Next Big Sound is? Well, okay, our engineer better raise their hand. So Next Big Sound is music data analytics. We actually just launched Next Big Book as well, so diving into the book publishing scene. But what we've been doing is collecting data for about 5 years. We just had our 5-year anniversary. We've been collecting social media data for 5 years and allow you to look at it in a dashboard and see trends over time and put your sales data on top of that as well. We do a lot of predictive analytics with that data. So who's going to be the next big sound, and what's the next big track, and hopefully soon, what's the next big book?
And I'm Erika Elliott. I'm the Artistic Director of Summer Stage, which is a program of City Parks Foundation. We're the largest presenter of free arts and culture in New York City, and a background in hip-hop culture and booked clubs in New York, as well as worked at music agency and record label.
I didn't realize you did music agency as well and record label.
Yeah, yes you did.
So how does that fit into...
Not currently, but I'm just saying...
in the past,
yes.
Yes. I thought at the parks.
Not, to be clear, not currently, but just to give you a context of where it came from.
And we're waiting on producer DJ Just Blaze. He's on text, making it as fast as he can. So I think we're just going to dive in to start with, I guess I'm going to start with Erika. And if you could just talk a little bit about the curation process. Well, let's talk first about your actual craft of what you do, and the curation process and how you kind of approach that.
So currently I'm responsible for the festival in its entirety, so it's themes as well as booking all the music, word, film, and overseeing the dance curation for all the 5 boroughs and Central Park. We do about 50 to 100 free shows. That's probably 200 plus artists a season. And the process is a daunting one in that we are kind of mandated by the organization to be reflective of New York City and all the neighborhoods. We serve underserved neighborhoods outside of Central Park, so most of the parks that we operate in are in neighborhoods that don't get a lot of programming. And so it's about figuring out what's appropriate for those communities, trying to make sure that we are booking talent that's going to bring people out. And in Central Park, the process is, the festival has a long history with world music and global music from around the world, both to debut things here that have both genres and artists who have not been to the United States, and also to, again, be reflective of New York City and the cultural fabric of the city. So the challenge in doing that is, to me, is that if I was working on a festival that was specifically reggae or specifically indie rock or specifically something, there's a lot more space. My biggest challenge every year is I'm probably going to have one of any of those given genres. I'm probably going to have one African show, I'm probably going to have one jazz show. And again, within those nuanced genres, there's a million artists and a million different styles. So how to decide from all that's out there what's going to be your one show for that year.
And how do you do it? Yeah, it's an amazing thing. You're creating all of these different shows in all of these different parks.
Yeah.
And just how do you pick which artist you're going to go with? What's the process?
Well, I think there's no short answer to that question, and it gets asked frequently, and like all things in life, I mean, this has been a journey of work, so I've been doing it for a long time, both at the organization and prior to that working in music. I've been at the organization 10 years. I certainly came in with some ideas about what I wanted to do and what was appropriate. So, but you know, there's not a short answer. And I always like to remind people when it gets asked is the way that I do it is very different than the person at Lincoln Center or Celebrate Brooklyn even. I mean, every person is going to do their job, whatever that job is, in their own way and hopefully put their own stamp on it. As a curator, you kind of hope that your point of view, whatever that point of view is translated in what you're booking. And I do think that my curation has a point of view. When asked internally, I say that my focus is on contemporary music from around the world, and that's a distinct point of view in that I am not so interested in traditional forms from whatever given country we're presenting. So if we're doing music from Brazil, I want to know what people are listening to in Brazil, what are the big names there, and bring that type of talent to New York versus sort of traditional assumptions about what Brazilian or things that have already been popularized here. But how do I do it? I mean, it's, you know, it's in the fabric of my life. I go out all the time. I have built a network around the world. I go to a million shows. I talk to agents. I go to conferences. I mean, it's all the things that probably everybody already knows. And from that, and my career, piecing together a season. So, I don't know. That's clear.
And do you look at it, just one more question on this for right now,
Yeah.
do you look at it regionally? Do you look at it targeted, like this artist would make sense more in this particular
For sure.
room?
For what I do, there's aspects of that. Again, it's much different than like when I was booking a club. But for me, there is a regional aspect because I'm booking in parks out in all 5 boroughs. So what's going to work in Staten Island is not necessarily going to work in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and what works in Red Hook is not necessarily going to work in Brownsville. And certainly that's true of Harlem or the Bronx versus those same neighborhoods. And sometimes similar things will work, but I do look at it regionally. I've been a real supporter in the organization of connecting artists with neighborhoods that they're from. So if like Paulie's from Bed-Stuy and we have a venue to present him, that's the venue we should play. And as much as possible, connect artists with neighborhoods or parks that they personally have some connection to. And we just had a show in Brownsville and it was Duck Down and they're from that neighborhood and can talk about we're from those projects. And so for that. For Central Park, it's a different animal. And again, usually the way I'm approaching it is just trying to imagine sort of general themes and genres that I would like to see presented in the city that present a broad range of artistic forms and genres and represent communities that are predominant in the city. And that's even a hard thing to do, excuse me, of course. But and then from there, that's where well, I guess I should just touch on the fact that especially for international artists, there's a whole other component of knowing who's touring. Because as much as you may want some artists from a certain country to come here and present, they're often on very specific tour schedules and won't often come to the US unless there is a specific reason or they just plan to, and it's knowing the people that are planning those tours because certain artists come every 3 years, some come every 5 years on the headlining level. I have done a lot in my career there to book artists who don't ever come or haven't come and be the catalyst for them coming here for the first time. But it is regional, John. It's all of those things.
Okay. And Syd, in terms of your craft, can you talk to us a little about what your job is and how you approach curation?
Sure. So my job at Next Big Sound is Director of Client Services, which is actually incredibly unique position at the company because I hear how everyone is using the platform. So promoters, bookers, A&R, people, record label execs, and have all these different use cases that are always so fascinating. Everyone's using data differently to help inform their decisions. With everything that Erika is doing to make her lineup for the year, the idea is that Next Big Sound wouldn't replace what Erika does, but maybe some of the things she does give her a little bit more free time, and to supplement that, what is probably a really well-honed and amazing gut instinct about who's going to work with data and giving you hard facts so you know it's going to be that promoter who's buying a show can have a better idea that when they book the show, they're going to make money off the show and not lose money. You're going to be a lot more excited about putting that money down and taking that risk when you know that you're going to get money back, that it's going to be a sellout show.
How can you tell that?
So there are a lot of different metrics in Next Big Sound. We've collected data from everywhere. I think that one of the most successful indicators is actually Wikipedia page views. And the one that's really interesting, we found that out doing a Granger causality study. So Granger causality, closest thing you can get to actual causal relationship. And we have a data science team, and I'm not even going to know how to begin to explain the exact way to conduct a Granger causality study. But essentially what it showed is that Wikipedia page views, a metric that people don't even really know exists usually or that you can look at, is really closely linked to sales. Now I'd love to be able to do the study with ticket sales, because I think that would be even more interesting. My background, I actually worked at William Morris booking agency for 3 years before coming to Next Big Sound. But we did it with album sales. And Wikipedia...
As did Erika, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And actually, just as a point of reference too, if it's not clear and people aren't familiar with the festival, everything we do is free. So everything that I'm booking specifically is free. So it's either, so just in terms of metrics and calculations and even being able to track sales or ticket counts, we don't
Right.
have that aspect.
But to know that the room would be packed
Yeah.
and have that confidence to know that you're picking the right person for the right venue, the right borough, having that confidence, not replacing the person making the decision.
But you can't do it with ticket sales. So how do you determine that this artist is going to make you money based on Wikipedia pages in that market?
So Wikipedia page views, what I was saying, really good indicator for sales. We haven't done the study with ticket sales data, but for album sales data, and generally Wikipedia is a very reactive metric because it's very proxy for interest. Think about it for a second. What am I going to do when I hear about a new track, or I hear a new artist, or I see them on TV? I'm going to Google them. And after I Google them, I'm either going to go to their website, or maybe I'm going to find more information and go to their Wikipedia page. And artist websites, they're going to be completely different. I don't know where to find their tour schedule. I don't know where to find information about them. But a Wikipedia page, I know exactly how that's formatted. And so we find that people go to Wikipedia, and it's a great proxy for interest about the artist. So that's just one of the things we do. We also have virality scores, and we have a predictive analytics,
What's a virality score?
So a virality score is going to show someone's, how viral a track is on YouTube, or how viral a track is on radio, or how viral the artist is on general. So, for example, this morning I was thinking about this panel and what I was going to talk about, and I checked out who had a really high virality score, and I saw that Magic, who has a new track, Rude, they're really high up on the list right now. Iggy Azalea was up there back in January, way before she was on the Billboard 200, Hot 100. So these are predictive metrics that are going to try and show you the next big thing, so you can get on the bandwagon before anybody else, and hopefully help break that artist as well.
And that's in terms of social and basically virality, but not so much in terms of ticket sales.
No, so we don't incorporate any ticket sale data just yet. It would be amazing to get tickets, especially, like I said, my background being an agency, I would love to see ticket sales in there. But I also know that when I was an assistant, my job was to call the promoter 3 days a week and ask what the ticket sales were, and you get a different number a lot of the time. So it's not very consistent. You don't get daily data. Next Week Sound does do daily data, but that would be a wonderful addition to the dashboard.
And how does radio and airplay fit into the kind of, I guess, algorithm in terms of virality and social? Is it weighted?
It's all weighted, exactly. So actually, radio is not in our predictive metrics. Our predictive metrics are based on social primarily. We do have radio in the platform though. So we have media-based spins, and we have by audience. And radio still a massive indicator for success, especially on a track. But it's all weighted, and those weights change. So the Billboard chart that we do, Social 50, that is all of our social data, and Facebook is weighted differently than YouTube, is weighted differently than your Instagram, and it all depends on the popularity of the network, and how many people are on the network is how it's going to be weighted. And
so what's the most popular network?
What's the consumption? So YouTube and Vivo have by far the highest numbers. There are most people watching and consuming data consuming.
So your score goes up. Primarily, YouTube has like the highest factor in that.
It changes pretty regularly, but your YouTube metrics will definitely help. I think that I'm not actually sure what the weights are right now. We changed it a couple weeks ago, so I'm not up to date on it, but definitely.
Constantly readjusting.
Constantly readjusting to what is more popular and what's the times are changing. I mean, when we started, we were tracking MySpace and Friendster back in 2009, and we haven't tracked MySpace in over a year right now since the new launch, and Friendster and we dropped years and years ago. So gotta keep changing.
And Erika, do you use any of these data metrics? I mean, you book some of the biggest parks in the city for sure.
I would say, no, not really. I mean, YouTube, yes, for content, but I'm not necessarily, it's not a deal breaker if the views are not particularly high. For me, it's more of a reference point, particularly on the live aspect. If it's an international artist that I can't see, certainly if they have a lot of traction, it's great, and I can see that they're getting a lot of views, but it's more about just content, being able to see them, or see them live if I can't actually see them showcased somewhere.
And does it matter how many views are on that, or doesn't really factor in?
I will obviously take note, and like I say, it's not a deal breaker. It certainly is a positive if you see that it's something that has a lot of views, because that somebody wanted to see it, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
And do you think, say the reports that you do might be able to influence what people are booking? Are you finding that people are booking based on
definitely.
Are there festivals that get your data? Is there examples where you've seen this?
Absolutely. So last year we worked with a festival. I would say, and actually to Erika's point, it's not about the total views, because obviously an artist who's huge is going to have a lot of total views, and you might be more curious about who's growing faster and where the buzz is, and that's actually where more value is at. I always am telling clients, don't look at the total views, look at the percentage change, and look at who's growing, the virality score. But to your specific question about festivals or promoters, bookers using it, most common use case I would say would be for opening acts and small stages. So you know who your headliner is probably, but what local act is going to bring the most people and bring them in early? I don't want when gates open for it to be empty. So who can I look at? Who's growing the most? Who's got the most engagement online? And Next Big Sound can really help with that. That's the most common use case for promoters.
Why not headliners?
I think most, I'm not booking festivals. I mean, Erika might be able to answer this better, but my understanding is that really you're booking headliners a year in advance for, let's say, really big festivals. They know who they want, they know who's going to be on tour, they know who's releasing an album, who's going to be on cycle, because the agent's calling them and they're saying, so-and-so's coming out with an album, I want you to book them. They got to be the headliner of the vault this year. And those are the things that are booked first. Could Next Big Sound help in deciding? Yeah, absolutely. I think that we could help with headliners, but the most common use case would definitely be the middle to smaller acts, festivals, and for booking shows.
Have there ever been festivals that have been primarily just booked based off of data?
Not the whole entire lineup that I'm aware of. In fact, what I think would be a better use case for festivals, and this is what I remember being the biggest pain in the ass, when I was an assistant, is arguing over billing. Who's going to be top billed? And who's going to be, have the biggest name? And a lot of festivals now, some of them are just doing alphabetical. And you know what? I bet that Just Blaze would have a lot of input on this, because especially in the EDM world, it is really cutthroat with lineups and who's going to be billed above who. Now, if you just did that based on data, then you wouldn't even have to argue about it anymore. Just say, you know what? This is what it is. We're doing it based on data, and alphabetical Well, that's not nearly as exciting.
It's interesting. I agree. If Just Blaze was here, he would have a very interesting perspective on this. It's great to see two completely different kind of strategies and tactics that like don't really overlap, even though it's the same industry. I'm just curious from gut, like you're coming basically from gut and you're speaking on basically from data perspectives. Can you determine what artists or what songs are going to be impacted? Like you probably, the mentality is in some people's minds that they can find and act better just based off of instinct than versus data. And I tend to agree with that. Like, can Netflix's algorithm recommend what movie I want to watch more than my own kind of gut instinct? And my general feeling is no, like that Netflix doesn't know what movie I want to watch more than what I know what movie I want to watch when I want to watch it. So I'm just curious, coming from that perspective, what just to kind of get a feel from, because your data and kind of gut, what songs or artists you feel like are coming up this summer that have you feeling like, okay, these are artists that are on your radar for professional reasons?
Well, it's a really hard thing to do I'll try and come to that question, but for me, I do think that it is changing so quickly that I think metrics will have an impact that maybe they haven't had in the past. So clearly they're being used in ways to move the conversation forward. And it's a scary thing when you're operating, your sole job is really gut. So there's something that's really amazing about that, and you feel really blessed to be in a position to, based on your own gut, predict or choose what artists are going to play somewhere. I would say that I've had great success at doing that, and I've been known to do that, and I have some examples of things that were really, that I did predict and that were big. But I always say that, and people often will say, oh, how do you know? And I'm like, well, I don't operate in a vacuum. I'm not a genius. Like, I talk to the agent, I look at a couple things, I ask around, I ask the promoter. I mean, you still have, even if it's not metrics in the sense that she's taught, those are metrics.
Yeah.
You ask the guy who always knows. If it's an African band, you ask the promoter who's really, keyed into the African community to be like, is this really the biggest artist from Ghana? That's what this guy's telling me, but do they really care? And I can't know all that. So there is always metrics involved, and there is a bit of gut, and you hope you pick right. You also hope you're not replaceable just by metrics, and that human beings will continue to be able to, not have everything be entirely data-driven and have a human touch to it. And I think that, again, as a curator, you like to think that you have a point of view. I don't know that metrics or computer or analytics are going to be able to give you a personal point of view. They could tell you maybe the same thing, but maybe not even be able to explain why you got there, and hopefully a good curator can do that.
So you come at it more from like the hottest record of the summer or the hottest artist is less interesting to you? It's more about kind of expression of your point of view coming from the...
No, I mean, it's still, I have to fill the venue. It's a 5,000, in Central Park, it's a 5,000 capacity venue. I want it to be full. I feel like that's my responsibility for the budget and the festival, and, my company is to make sure that I'm booking things that are on target and appropriate for the space and are going to bring audience. It doesn't make sense to have a 5,000 capacity venue and have 500 people. You're not really doing your job then. But I will say, in terms of my timeline for what I do, though, I am booking in December or January for summer, so I can't tell you what is the hot song this summer in December. I can, look at some metrics, ask some questions. I would say it's a guesstimate, and when you nail it and when it happens and when it comes together and that artist really is the biggest thing that summer, well, then you've done it right. And I've had more instances of that than otherwise, but sometimes things aren't quite as big as you thought they would be. But again, as someone, I've been doing it a long time, so I know how to still make it within the range that's acceptable for my festival.
Yeah. And Syd, so with that in mind, do you, in terms of data, I know you're very on the pulse in terms of your data can tell you what's relevant right now, if Magic is the song or the group, that you can tell like this is taking off at that moment. Can you go back to like a November, December charts?
Yeah. And
are you pretty predictive?
Absolutely.
In terms of what's relevant 6 months from now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the stock quote is, if you give Next Big Sound 100 artists, if we give you 100 artists, over a third of those artists are going to be massive hits if we use our predictive algorithm. So that's really good. The other ones are still going to be big, but we're talking massive successes, over a third. So that's a really, really good track record. Iggy Azalea, back in November, actually, so the time period you're talking about, she had just broken above 50% on our predictive score. And when somebody breaks above 50%, that's actually pretty successful, right? So 50%, she broke. 66, she's growing in December. January, she's peaking about 66, 70, and we're saying that is going to be the person who hits the Billboard 100. She's going to be the song of the summer. She's going to come out. She's clearly viral now. She's getting huge. There's a lot of momentum. And now we see Fancy. That's exactly what's happening this summer. So that's the exact timeline that we're talking about now. Now, when I looked this morning, now these metrics change every day depending on what's going on. But when I looked this morning, the new Magic track, Rude, had a score of 66%. So we'll see 6 months from now what happens. Now, I hope nobody gets mad at me for making that call, but we'll see what happens 6 months from now.
Can you set the metrics so that like it's gonna be picked 6 months from now? Like you want to know, well, not what's relevant right now and what's kind of growth is going at a certain rate. Can you say, based on the rate growth, we want to know what's relevant in 6 months?
Yeah, so that's the percentage. So at about 60, anywhere from let's say 60 to 70, it's very high. So I would, if they continue along that path, that's definitely 6 months from now, what that's going to be. A person who's going to be hitting the Billboard 200 to next week is going to have a score of 98%. So right now I would be looking for people who have a score somewhere between 60 and 70.
Is it easier to predict what's going to be hot in 2 weeks based on your service, or hot in 6 months?
So it's easier for 2 weeks because the shorter the time span, the more accurate we're going to be. But we are fairly accurate within 6 months. If you're saying 66% 6 months before, that number is going to keep going up. So if you're looking for those 66% and you have your gut and your ear and you listen to the music and you see what other metrics and what your context is telling you, so what the agents is telling you, and if they're on cycle, I would go for it. And that's what Next Big Sound is for. It's that supplemental data as well.
Supplemental, yeah.
And I was just going to add in too, for what I'm doing and a lot of presenters nationally and internationally are doing, it's also, we don't necessarily, as you were I think you were kind of going this way, I don't necessarily want Iggy Azalea. Like, I don't need the biggest pop star. I'm actually not that interested in that for my festival and for performing arts festivals and world music festivals and things that are not driven by pop music particularly. Now I may have one pop act. I certainly, if you look at what I book, I try and have a couple things that are on par with the stature of artists that I can get playing, Coachella or Bonnaroo for indie rock or rock or certain genres. But in fact, for us, it is sort of, again, it's more about the curation, it's about the story, it's about representing culture and communities, it's about, looking at trends internationally.
Just play, should we put them on?
Yes, on speakerphone.
Really?
I don't know. We might want to
yet.
first.
Just, should we Skype you in? Okay, so it's right across the street from the hotel. Yep, you'll see it. It's a big K.
There's a lot of doing this in curation.
Kitty corner from Brooklyn Brewery.
But I'll just say,
We're in
in
motion
terms of
here,
numbers,
so I'll see you in a second.
because we're free, there's also, not only artistically maybe that wouldn't be appropriate for our festival, but we're also a limited amount of size. So we're not a huge festival. So to have the biggest commercial pop hit right now, it doesn't really make sense for the space that we're looking. It's in fact probably too big. And there have been a couple instances where, look, I had Vampire Weekend, and I booked them quite early, and we had a free show, and they were probably really too big at that point. But so sometimes that happens, and it is, for me, it's more a fine line about predicting, but also it actually not being too big because it's free, and you don't want more people outside the venue and interested in coming in than the venue can hold. And that has happened a couple times. So for me, there's a little bit of that as well.
So who do you predict is going to be the show of, like, one of the bigger shows of your summer? Is there one that you're like anticipating? Like, this show is going to hit? Or not from or you don't even come at it from that perspective. You come at it like, this is the show I'm personally excited about because it speaks for what I'm trying to do.
I think it will be, I mean, it definitely is a bit of both. And this summer is interesting, and actually for exactly what you're asking, because actually historically I've had usually one show that's the one show kind of like that. That's like the breakout person that I feel like I took a risk on, that it was a little predictive, kind of whatever. This year I'm trying to think if there's, this is a year where I don't necessarily think there's one of those shows. I mean, I've had Alabama Shakes, and things like the XX, things like that, where it was a clear early booking and it was, a big deal and whatever. And I nailed it. But this year I wouldn't say there's as much of that. We're going into our 30th anniversary next year, so I don't know if that maybe impacted me in some way, and what I was doing this year wasn't about that as much. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I'm really proud of and excited about personally, and things that I think will be a home run, but maybe not forecasting in the way that it's being presented here. I mean, I have, I don't know, artists that are really big that we've never had, like Wika, who plays Carnegie Hall. That's a big play for us, and that's exciting. And there are some other artists like Hooray for the Riff Raff, who's kind of developing, and for me it's just as exciting to have them as it is to be pairing them with Dr. John, who is kind of an iconic New Orleans band, and to have them together is what's exciting, not necessarily that they're going to be bigger than him maybe this summer. So
I'm sorry, I'm interested in what you're saying. I'm just going to grab Just Blaze.
it's okay. It's important. It's
Artists, it could be fun.
okay.
Panelists up here. Erika programs the city parks. So she's the artistic director for all the parks in the city.
Not all the parks, let's be clear. Summer Stage Festival specifically.
Thank you.
Oh, but I seriously need to actually talk to you after this story.
Okay.
And Syd is should we call it a data scientist?
Well, I guess maybe more close, if you want to put data in there, would be more of an analyst, but director of client services for a data company.
Okay, it analyzes next big sound. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Okay, cool.
They predict. Well, how would you just kind of give the boiler on what you do, just so we can quickly get Justin to the conversation?
Sure. So we've been collecting social data since 2009, and we use that data to predict breakout artists. We also have a platform where you can track your social data and your sales over time as well.
Cool. So just to kind of get rolling here, Justin, I'm going to go to the same question I asked everybody, and then quickly integrate you in. Talk to us a little about what you're doing these days, and how curation and the art of curation plays into that.
Well, for me, obviously it's a little different. I mean, I'm a DJ, producer, jack of all trades, master of none. But I do okay. For me, curation has played into my career these days in terms of finding new breakout artists to collaborate with, and also new breakout DJs to collaborate with on two ends. For one, a couple of years ago, my agent discovered a young kid by the name of Bauer, and he kept bugging me to get in the studio with him. And I was just like, yeah, whatever, all right, whatever. He kept bugging me so much that eventually I said, all right, fine, I'll do it. Tell him to meet me at this restaurant at like 2 in the morning. And he got out of bed, which I didn't know at the time. He got out of bed and came and met me at this restaurant in my neighborhood. And we ended up having a great conversation, which resulted in us collaborating on a record called Higher featuring Jay-Z randomly, which then changed my entire life and has had me on tour for the last year and a half. Hence the giant bags under my eyes. But it was...
So are you picking artists to collaborate based on what, a trusted network?
Yes.
Or is there when you're picking an artist to work with, is there anything else besides a trusted network?
No, for me it has to come from somebody that I trust. But then also, from what you were saying, your stuff is based a lot on metrics. For me, it's based a lot on feelings. So the reason I told my agent, before I even stepped in the studio with this kid, I want to just have dinner with him, was because for me, I need to feel the person out. because my collaborations and my projections are a bit more personal. So for me, it was a thing where you can have, say, two great producers or a great producer and a great artist. It doesn't mean they're gonna make a great record together. You take a look at, say, R. Kelly and Jay-Z, Best of Both Worlds. It was a great project on paper, ended up being a disaster in real life. And I think a part of that was, aside from, well, let me backtrack a little bit on that. The project itself musically was great, but the execution, because of what happened with Kelly at that time, ended up being a mess. So for me, it's more of a thing of, or it's more of a case of, can we get along? Do we vibe well? You know, just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it's going to actually execute well.
So how does, do you use data for any of the, like even with songs, there's rumors that producers are picking melodic beats based on rhythms. Is data play any of a factor in anything that you're doing? Can you think of?
Not as much as the people standing next to me, probably. Again, I go mostly off of vibe, but I do something different than what they do. I'll give you another example. A friend of mine was like, "Hey, you should meet up with this kid, Mac Miller," and I was like, "For what?" And he's like, "Just trust me, you should." And I'm like, "All right, fine." So he came to the studio, and he was like this 18-year-old kid from Pittsburgh. And I was just like, all right. And we had a conversation, and we ended up getting along. And at the time, the funny thing is our first conversation was actually based on metrics. He had maybe 20,000 Twitter followers at the time. I had maybe 100,000. And we were actually had a conversation about the amount of his amount of Twitter followers matching his fan base. And our running joke was that one day he was gonna have more Twitter followers than me, and I was like, yeah, right, whatever. You know, just teasing each other. Because we got along that well. Now he has, I think, the last I checked, 3.4 million Twitter followers. I have 300,000. So clearly he won that bet. But ultimately, again, it was we ended up putting out a record together. It was based on just a good vibe. That being said, on the flip side of things, I also do a party on Thursday. Oh shit, this Thursday. I've lost track of days.
A creative mind at work.
I do a Thursday night event at Webster Hall called the House Party, where basically Webster Hall came to me wanting to collaborate on curating the entire building. So part of what I do need to do is sometimes when certain names are suggested to me that I'm not familiar with, the first thing I will do is, when they're suggesting guest DJs or guest performers, is go and check their metrics. Go and see what are their Twitter, how many likes do they have on Facebook? What are their Twitter followers? I'll take it back to the ancient days and go to their MySpace and see what they have there. Or go to SoundCloud, which I feel like is a great music discovery tool, and see what their SoundCloud activity is like. And that definitely does play a part in how I select who I will or won't have performing with us.
What about with what's the process when you decide what song you want to play next as a DJ?
That's, for me, it's more of a vibe thing. It's more of me looking at the crowd. Sometimes when you, as a DJ, your primary job is to read the crowd and feel them out. For me at least, I like to give the crowd what they want to hear, as long as it stays in line with my persona, my personality, and my musical selection. So there are records that get brought to my attention, or artists who are asked to perform at the party who get brought to my attention. And for me, I think as a DJ, that's more of a vibe thing. Do I think that this record that nobody knows, or this artist who perform a song that nobody knows can work in this particular moment right now? Yes, because there's times where you can look at your crowd and say, it's now 1:45 a.m. and this record will work because people are so charged and ready to go. There are times where you can look at your crowd and say it's now 3 a.m. and I have to give them exactly what they want, because I want to give them a memorable night. So I think in terms of new artists and knowing what records to play at what time, that more so comes from my instincts as being a DJ. You know, you can play a record at 1 o'clock and it can go over great. When the crowd's still warming up, you can play a record if the crowd doesn't go at 3 a.m. and it's totally kill the vibe.
So the venue's been nice enough to stay open a little bit longer. You know, at 5:30 there's a hard stop. So you know, we're already going a little over, but we have a couple minutes for questions from the crowd. I don't know if you guys have any. If not, I'm happy to keep rolling because I've still got a bunch more. But I just want to give everybody a chance.
Achieve it a little bit.
Sure, no, I understand. If there's anything else for now, let me know. Sure.
So I was asking a question about the hoax of Iron Maiden using BitTorrent and Trackware to do a concert. I was wondering, is that theoretically possible yet, or is that like, what do we get for location data and can that be used?
Sure.
Can you briefly repeat the question, and can you
Okay.
also kind of explain? You went deep with this.
So there was an article, I don't know, gosh, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, something like that, came out, Iron Maiden uses BitTorrent data to route tour to Brazil. Not true.
That was fake?
It was an exaggeration, and it wasn't our data, but but the idea of it is not too far from the truth. Could you route an entire tour based off data? Wouldn't tell you what venue to go to quite yet. You know, that's really important. You play the wrong room in a city, you're going to kill that artist's career potentially. So could the data do that for you? No, but could it tell you where there are anomalies in your fan base? You know, New York City, huge population, going to be a lot of fans coming out of there. Well, I want to normalize by population and see where could I play a midweek date. I got a free Wednesday, I'm DJ, I don't have to carry around all my gear. Where do I play? What's on route? I've got 5 different options. Next Big Sound can certainly help you, or any geo data would be able to help you narrow down where you're going to play that midweek date, pick up some extra cash.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Because you're obviously well more versed in the data stuff, but I am hearing about a company called We Demand and their success in Brazil in doing sort of that type of work. And
Like
I was wondering,
crowdfunding.
well, it's not crowdfunding. What it is people in a certain market demanding an artist,
Yeah.
and based on that, the artist, if they reach that critical mass, the promoter then knows and the people that demanded it first potentially get the tickets for free, or they
Yeah.
get a chance to meet the artist, and then everybody else who buys later, just the show happens. Now, it came out of a desire in Brazil specifically, and I'm curious if there's other examples, but where often artists will play Sao Paulo, because that's a big city, big market, you can do a lot of business there, but they would never go to Rio. So this company primarily initially started because they wanted to make the case to routing, you know, to agents and to artists so that they could do the business there, and the technology came over there. And now it's also being used, from what I understand, from the artist side, again, to do just what you're sort of asking. And again, the venue thing is key.
Yeah.
So it definitely can't do that, but it can tell you, like, this amount of people want you to play some market that maybe you hadn't considered, or
What's the question?
whatever. So is that technology
Yeah.
exists in other platforms, or using them? Have you seen that to be successful? Is just what's in, because it's the first I sort of heard of that specificity that was not crowdfunding, but really identifying desire for a particular artist in a market. And
Yeah.
they're saying we're considering using them on a regional. So we're considering looking at it from a Brooklyn versus Bronx.
So on request or on demand fan, is that actually working?
Yeah.
Are you seeing that as a success? And are you guys incorporating it? Are other companies incorporating it? What's the best metrics on that?
Yeah, so Next Big Sound doesn't incorporate it, but there are some companies, and there are companies in the United States that are doing it. Andrew Bird, I think, was one of the first artists that actually did that successfully in the United States. And they, you know, it takes a lot of the risk from the promoter away too. Exactly what you're talking about. Like, do I bother taking him to Rio? Is it going to be empty? Is it going to be worth it for the artist? I love it because I think you're bringing the artist to new places, and a lot of the scary part about it, the risk, is taken away. I think that I know it's out there. I know the companies in the United States are doing it. We're not incorporating it, but I see it being even more, absolutely, and I think it's going to be incorporated more and more as well, especially to get artists to markets they don't visit frequently.
Interesting. So new platform potential on the rise. So how does your each individual crafts and specializations, how does it apply to other industries? Just because maybe everybody in here isn't just in music, and so it becomes interesting when you can kind of make it universal. How do, as a curator for parks and an artistic director and a data specialist with client services and a DJ producer, how do you apply that into like that kind of process of thinking into other things or other areas outside of just music?
Well, that's I'd love to answer that too, but the only thing, just as a thought, is that I believe in probably in every field it's about having your network, right, and having people that you trust within any given area. So if you are really weak on production, but you have your person who is really about production, you want to have that person in your pocket, one that you can go to with this question. Same thing with a lawyer, same thing with, if it's about social media or someone who's really about data, and that's not your thing, like having a network of people to support whatever aspect, whatever industry you're doing that relates to the field, that can be your sounding board and also give you maybe an area of, and a lens that's their area of expertise that you really trust. And for me, I'm doing it across a wide range, but I think for any career, you need those allies that are really both mentors and friends that you can go to. Yeah.
For each, Syd, I think you got some clear ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I talked about books before, so publishing, there's data everywhere. We were talking before about mobile data before the panel started, and you're just spewing data, you don't know it all the time, everybody, whatever you're doing, and it's not only related to music, but also anything music related that you are doing could also be incorporated to brands. So a lot of people will look at social media data, talking about brand sponsorships, demographic data, what's a good pairing, and what kind of sync do you want in a commercial. So there's lots of ways to incorporate data. I think I have the easiest answer for this particular question. I think it's really boundless for what you can use data to help supplement your decisions.
In predicting trends. So you know what the hottest toothpaste is going to be 6 months from now?
I could, in theory, but we don't track toothpaste. I'm a Colgate person, so I don't know.
Gut instinct, right? Not data.
It just tastes better.
I'm going to be honest, I totally missed the point of the question. Because the answers went so many different ways, I was like, wait, did he ask this one?
So the question basically is, how do you apply the process of how you pick songs and artists to work with, and even music that you make, to other industries?
Well, for me, what I get approached a lot about outside of DJing and producing is also a lot of scoring and, for film, TV, movies, things like that. And sometimes, there's competition there. It's like, do you do Ice Age or do you do A Bug's Life? Just random examples. I didn't actually get confronted with that, but just as an example. And you have to kind of, look and say, all right, well, which project makes more sense in terms of exposure, in terms of what will the client allow me to do to personalize it as well. Because for me, I am a brand. So I have to sometimes go with what's going to make the most sense for myself. It could be that, say, maybe Ice Age, just using this as an arbitrary example, Ice Age may only do 300 million at the box office, where A Bug's Life may do 500 million. But Ice Age will let me put my name in the commercial. That to me is worth a bit more, because they're both going to spend both of those franchises are going to spend advertising dollars on major networks. Whether it be TV, trailers, whatever. So I have to balance out the amount of business or revenue they generate, along with the creative freedom they're going to give to it. I actually did a bunch of viral stuff, or stuff that was intended to go viral for Ice Age a couple of years back. And one of the key things that led me to say yes to the project were they were going to give me complete creative freedom and allow me to insert my name, my producer tag, and things like that in the commercials and on the internet videos. That was a big boom for me. Same thing with EA Sports. I used to do all their music for the sports game titles, and they gave me complete creative control of the commercials. Initially, the deal was about scoring the game, but that led to, well, we'll let you do all the music for all the trailers, and we'll let you do all the music for the commercials, and we'll give you creative freedom over the commercials, and we'll let you put your name in all the commercials.
What's more important, creative control or branding?
Well, that's my point. Is there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
You know, say both companies are going to give you a certain amount of creative control, but one company is going to allow you to actually insert your brand or some semblance of your brand into the commercial, but they might pay you a little bit less. To me, that's more important. The reason I decided to do NBA Live for EA Sports was the fact that they had a approximately $20 million campaign for all the commercials to run on the NBA on TNT or whatever network shows the NBA games. They had brought out a certain amount of commercial time, but they were also fine with me branding myself within those commercials and inserting my name or my likeness into those commercials, so it made sense. You know, it wasn't a ton of money. It was a decent amount. It wasn't a ton of money, but I had to also realize that these commercials were going to be running during every NBA game.
There's value to the
For
exposure.
the entire season. So some kid who's sitting out in Wisconsin who doesn't even know the first thing about Just Blaze is all of a sudden now exposed to my brand because he's a basketball fan, not because he's a rap fan. And those are the things that will balance out.
Everybody knows who you are. But, well, so I know everyone's probably getting antsy. It's almost happy hour. The end of the Northside Festival, day one, has really come to that point, and now it's time to enjoy music. But I will remind everybody to go check out Just Blaze at his house parties at Webster Hall to review the Billboard social top 50 charts to find out what's relevant on the pulse when it comes to new music. And to definitely check out Central Park Summer Stage all summer long and all the other parks that Erika's curating. I want to thank everybody so much for coming. Get a beer or two. I heard the happy hours start at 6. And enjoy some music and enjoy the innovation days as day 2 continues tomorrow. Thank you.